When we talk about advocacy, people talk about what are we advocating for what, but we never quite learn about the how. And how do you have a good advocacy? What is the difference between, just making noise about something, but actually doing something systematically with great methodology and having action?
Just having the Advocacy Accelerator as something that exists is very refreshing. And the reason I say that is because it's a space that is very much needed. As people who do advocacy, as strategists like myself, who engage in different spaces, it's important to have a space where we all come together and talk about what exactly is needed from a capacity point of view, from an engagement point of view. How can we do this better? How do we engage with governments? How do we use tools such as social media to make sure that we are dynamic in the work that we do?
It is a platform that connects the advocate, a platform that enhances the capacity of the advocate, a platform that creates a chance to share experience and learning. To me, that is very key. We need to bring the advocates together to have a roundtable conversation and learn, and not only to learn, but to take the message back to their country to influence action.
In every country, there are gaps, and advocacy is about talking about how those gaps can be addressed. And sometimes when you are a lone actor in a country, or when you are acting in your own country alone, you do not realize how much a particular issue may be impacting the entire continent or broader, many more countries. And so Advocacy Accelerator is going to create the opportunity to convene meetings that bring together different advocates to be able to talk through some of the issues so that they can share experiences, but also to strengthen the voice of the advocates when they talk about particular things. And the whole area of capacity building is there's need to build the capacity of advocates, but also linking advocates to resources and connecting them to technical resources, but also pointing them in the direction of where they can access financial resources. So all these are things that Advocacy Accelerator is going to be able to do.
What makes us different is that we're not issue focused, we're issue agnostic. And what we're going to do is we're going to be a platform where we can help advocates and institutions across a variety of themes and across a variety of sectors. I think what is exciting for me is that the accelerator is bringing new ways of increasing the strength of advocacy. And I think this hasn't been done before. There's been lots of failures in terms of the strength of advocacy. So I really see an important role for the accelerator to play going forward.
You rarely meet players in advocacy spaces outside of advocacy spaces, where you're already knee-deep in work and trying to push for an agenda or a policy change or whatever. So it's nice to take a breath and take a little bit of a breather, convene together with nothing to push specifically, and just take stock of what's happening, what's working, what are the gaps, what can we learn from each other, and what tools and what models can we use to make our work better.
The Advocacy Accelerator is offering people like ourselves and other people in advocacy space a platform to learn, to engage, to share, and basically to learn from each other.
I'm really looking forward to listening and learning and hearing best practice from across different thematic areas, different thematic areas of work. You seem to be, sometimes you get siloed in your area of work and you forget that there's other people pushing for some of the same things. And I think it would be an interesting space to have intersections between health and gender, or land and public finance.
And the thing about the panelists we have today, they have all been part of the advocacy movement in their area of expertise. So whether it's Janet Mugwa, who yes is sitting in the media, but is actually starting to do a lot of work personally and using her voice and her name to do things. It'll be interesting to hear, how do you actually get the media to care? How do you get people to act and to move on to that? And that's what I'm really hoping she's going to be able to share with us. We have an advocate who's been dealing with this, and I want to know, what are the challenges they face? Like, what makes a good advocacy? What is successful about this? How are we able to get a quick grasp of some of these things and be able to move them on? So what I'm really keen to hear from the panel is their experience. I'm very keen for them to kind of set the mood for what the rest of the day is going to hold for us in lessons, understanding, experiences, and what the gaps are. I think the Advocacy Exchange has been very interesting, just to have a discussion about strategies and how do you work, and what approaches should you use. I think sometimes as civil society we focus so much on the work and the programming and writing proposals that we forget to take some time back and evaluate and have a discussion and learn from others. So it's been interesting to hear, to share experiences with different people.
The first panel for me was very profound in the sense that it was interesting to hear what the government perspective and the media perspective is when it comes to advocacy. And sometimes we feel like we are at loggerheads between advocates in the NGO sector or in the development sector with government or with media. But my takeout from there is we have to work together. We have to work as a partnership with government, with media, with the NGOs, with young people and with children if we are to have any impactful advocacy.
The morning session was quite interesting because then we had an opportunity to actually share a lot, to learn a lot from the panelists, and also the roundtable meeting on the effectiveness of actually measuring advocacy intervention, where the participants were able to share their varied level of expertise on how to measure advocacy interventions.
I really liked what Angeline spoke about data, and the fact that the issue of data is one that has been discussed in a lot of things, but she brought really good insight into it. And what was surprising to me is that we don't generate our own data for critical issues. And part of that conversation, you start asking, no wonder there's challenges in this. So even if you're advocating for better healthcare across Kenya, you're not working with all the Kenyan numbers. What does that mean? So what surprised me, for example, was the issue of the fact that the northern part or the arid areas, the places that have been neglected are not just neglected in terms of infrastructure, but with all the kind of NGOs who work there, that basics such as collection of data isn't something that the government has. So what are all those partners doing on the ground? What are all those people doing? How are they working? Reinforcing the thing that we're talking about, the Advocacy Accelerator doing, which is having homegrown advocates and starting to say this is some of the information. And that for me was the most surprising, that in an issue like data we don't have enough.
The expert we had at our table, Saida Ali, was amazing, and she gave a great framework. But I think in the conversation, one thing we all kind of agreed upon, and I think speaks to our professional backgrounds, is that social media is one tool. It is not necessarily the only tool open to an advocate or an advocacy campaign. I think you always have to start with the outcome you're trying to achieve, the people you're trying to affect and influence. And so obviously most advocacy campaigns have a larger strategy in how they do that. And a social media strategy, which we agreed is really important, is a subset of that. It should not replace a larger set of ways that you might go about affecting change in the world. But social media is obviously very powerful. And so I think any organization that does not have a social media strategy and has not thoughtfully approached that one toolbox should do so.
For the Advocacy Accelerator, a good role to play, especially with youth, is how do you build the capacity of young people to advocate, but also how do you teach organizations how to engage young people? How do you teach them the different tools to make advocacy exciting for young people? Because a lot of times the jargon is not something young people are interested in. Advocacy is also something that takes very long. And young people, young movements are usually engaging quick wins, you know? So for the accelerator, it would be nice for them to be able to develop a toolkit on engagement for young people and how they can ensure, or how organizations can ensure young people find advocacy work interesting, and young people can then get more interested to be part of the process, because then the policies that pass affect them as well.
I think for me, the biggest hope and dream for the Advocacy Accelerator would be that we find the space and the platforms and skills to impart to young people and let them figure out and also influence their own future. I think for a long time, sometimes we speak on their behalf and we don't quite get their message across. It doesn't resonate with them. So for me, my biggest dream with the Advocacy Accelerator would be that let's empower young people, let's provide them with the platforms, and let's connect them with the influencers they need to influence their own future.
I think one of the things that struck me the most was the fact that we had quite a number of young people who are on the ground and doing real advocacy work. And I think for me, that's really important because as the Global Advocacy Accelerator, we should not forget the youth, and we should make sure that we focus on practitioners, and we should not lose sight of the impact that they bring.
I loved the fact that we had a good mix in terms of demographics. We had young people that are new in their activism and in their advocacy work. And we also had the more experienced people who've used social media tools for a long time. So it was not a space that only one person knew it all, but a space where we all exchanged ideas, we shared how we've done things in the past, we shared what worked better, best in sending certain messages, and how we could improve and work better in sending very effective messages out there.
I think what stuck with me in the morning is what Dr. Githinji brought back from Kigali, from the professor, that the opposite of poverty is justice. I mean, I'd never thought about it that way, and for me, it set the pace for the conversations during the day.
I'm happy to have been here at the Advocacy Accelerator Forum. One, because my main issue was to just learn how to hold leaders accountable. And I got to learn from the roundtable experiences. I got to hear, how people do it in their organizations, and I got to learn a lot, and I'm taking it back with me.
For me, it was very interesting, very exciting, especially because we were sharing real experiences, real stories on what's been working, what's not working.
I think I've actually left with a couple of ideas, and I think I'm all the better for it in advocacy. Yeah.
It was a very exciting experience for various reasons. One, the content was very sound. It was very well organized. The exchange was very good, and the networking space was excellent.
So that's the most exciting thing, was to see actually people from all different spheres of advocacy coming here and sharing their experiences with the communities, with the work they're doing with policymakers. So that was what was most exciting for me this morning.
I think I go home with a lot of richness based on the sharings that I've had today, from what I've had the young people talk about, the media perspective to it. I go home with this rich basketful of some new ideas and not so new ideas, perhaps a bit polished in terms of how I would present them in future, because then I've had an opportunity of interacting and networking with even much more experienced advocacy experts, more experienced than me. I've also had an opportunity to interact with peers that I had not had an opportunity to sit down with and share in a long time, or some of them it was the first time. So just the richness of the relationships actually is what I take with me.
I've met some very interesting people. Some we've already made appointments that we're going to stay in touch, we're going to have conversations, just to exchange ideas, because there's so many people doing similar work, different fields, but really similar work. We're all trying to achieve a bigger goal. So it's been nice sharing.
It's been incredibly inspiring. For me, what this really is not an academic exercise. It's about belonging to a community of people who, one of the themes that came out in the conference was the opposite of poverty is justice, and to sit with people who are in their own way trying to change the world for the better is quite inspiring.
The Advocacy Accelerator is transformative. It is empowering. It is the thing that is going to take us to the desired future.